Joining us now to analyze today's headlines is Cristina Mislan. She's an assistant professor of journalism studies at the Missouri School of Journalism. Hi, Cristina.
Hello, Sonali.
An abandoned truck found on a European highway filled with the bodies of migrants has once more brought the crisis of migration to the fore. 71 bodies were found, likely of Syrian origin, inside a truck on a highway between Hungary and Austria. Among the dead were 60 men, 8 women and 3 very young children. They likely suffocated in the locked truck. A Bulgarian man connected with the truck has been arrested. The horrific news came on the same day as many as 200 people died in the Mediterranean Sea when a boat sank off of the coast of Libya. About 400 people had boarded that boat. Some 3,000 migrants were rescued by Swedish ship and Italian Coast Guardsmen separately. Well, Cristina, war-torn Middle Eastern and African nations seem to be just hemorrhaging people. Do you think that this migrant crisis could force Europe to examine both its foreign policies and immigration policies?
Well, we know that European countries have been saying for quite a while now that they're going to re-examine their policies, and that was months ago. We've been dealing, Europe has been dealing with this, although the United States has its own immigration issues as well. But Europe has been dealing with this for this past year. The issue of migrants dying overseas has been occurring for way too long now. And as one of their solutions, they put in place an operation that really served kind of like as a taxi service where Border Patrol agents would pick up refugees being carried by smugglers on boats. But that doesn't obviously seem to be stopping the number of people who are dying trying to get to Europe. So there obviously must be more. And some policy experts are suggesting that Europe should maybe look to U.S. for some ideas. But as I just mentioned, I'm not sure that's the best idea, as we're dealing with our own anti-immigration policies, and we're also part of the problem as well, U.S. foreign policy, that being the case. But, maybe implementing programs where refugees could actually attain asylum before leaving home, where Europe would actually be responsible for making sure that people could get to Europe safely.
Here in the United States, the National Labor Relations Board, or NLRB, has just struck a major blow to the corporate fast food industry. Companies like McDonald's had long protected themselves against being held accountable for labor violations, saying that that was the responsibility of the franchise owners. But in a 3-2 decision, the NLRB ruled that workers could hold parent companies liable for violations. The ruling is extremely significant in that unions could now negotiate directly with a handful of major companies instead of having to contend with thousands of smaller franchise owners. It also means that franchise owners may not necessarily be responsible when carrying out directives from parent companies that impact its workers. Unions like SEIU and the Teamsters celebrated the ruling. Millions of American workers are employed by franchises. Well, Cristina, do you see this as a huge legal victory that unions could take serious advantage of?
Yeah, there definitely is a huge advantage for unions here. Now, maybe if we could take this advantage and apply it elsewhere. For instance, there are many other institutions where the notions of employment need to be redefined so that various types of workers could be protected. Now, remember, though, for a while now, unions are still illegal in some states. And if we look at some of the latest stats, approximately about 11.8% of American workers are actually union members. And in the private sector, that's just 6.9%. So we still have a long way to go, but this is definitely, hopefully, a beginning to that.
And finally, a major tropical storm has hit the Caribbean island of Dominica and is headed toward Florida. In Dominica, 4 people were killed when the storm caused major mudslides. Erica is now unfolding in Puerto Rico, where major rains are hitting the island hard. It could hit Florida over the weekend or by Monday as a hurricane. The National Weather Service and other forecasters are confused about the storm's direction when its center started wobbling yesterday, which made it hard to forecast. Florida Governor Rick Scott said the storm posed a, quote, severe threat to the entire state. He's declared a state of emergency. This week marks the 10th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, which devastated New Orleans, killing thousands and displacing hundreds of thousands. Well, Cristina, Governor Rick Scott is a vehement climate change denier. He's even unofficially banned the use of the terms climate change and global warming in his presence. Do you see some major irony here?
Well, I'm not sure if it's irony. I think it's just interest at stake. And so, for instance, And I'll relate this. We can maybe think about Louisiana's Governor Bobby Jindal and this 10-year anniversary on Katrina. He recently just wrote a letter to President Obama before Obama went to New Orleans to speak, to say that President Obama should not say or politicize anything about climate change, et cetera, in his speech. Now, here's the thing, is that Bobby Jindal is funded by the energy companies. I mean, he has a plant right outside of his estate in Louisiana. The same thing goes for someone like Governor Rick Scott. Rick Scott has been funded politically by energy companies. So again, a lot of times when politicians are seen as these climate change deniers, I think we actually really need to start looking at, really, is it that they're deniers or their interests are not our interests?
Cristina, thank you as always for joining us. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thank you.
Cristina Mislan is our daily Newsflash guest expert. She's an assistant professor of journalism studies at the Missouri School of Journalism. This is Uprising, and by the way, you can check out my latest column at truthdig.com, where I write about a lot of the stories that you hear on the air. This week I wrote about Amazon, Amazon.com's workplace problems. Again, that's at truthdig.com. We'll be right back after this break.